I know that this district did X. It was big, it was high grade. Okay, it's proven that it's got scale and good grade. But from what we know studying deposits like it, whoa, there should be more of this here. Where is it? And that I think is going to be one of the other big things. And there's going to be blind deposits as well. I think overall, it's another factor saying geoscience-based discovery is really where things are going.
To meet the growing global demand for a cleaner, greener future, supported by alternative fuel materials, Argentina Lithium and Energy Corp has assembled a first-rate team of experts to acquire and advance the best lithium properties in the world-renowned Lithium Triangle.
Everybody, this is Robert Kientz with Stock Pulse Inside the Markets, and we have a returning guest. Well, she's returning because I've interviewed her before, but this may be the first time she's on this program. It is Lauren Megaw, who's responsible for investor relations and does many other roles at Reyna Silver. Lauren, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Always lovely to speak to you, Rob, and talk about what's going on in the world and especially what's happening over at Reyna Silver.
Yeah, Reyna Silver is such a great company. You know, we've spoken to Jorge and followed them for a long time. And in many ways, they were kind of like a Cinderella story in this space. So they kind of leapt on the scene and it just kind of took the market by storm. And everybody loves, to talk about Reyna. A really cool story. And we'll definitely get into that, during the program. One of the reasons I wanted to have you on, though, is to talk a little bit about projects and how they work, because investors will invest in this space and they're looking for good deals. They want to put money in. And they're looking for winners. And it just seems to be sort of that elusive goal of figuring out, which companies are going to do well. Certainly, Reyna's done well for itself. What do you think separates Reyna maybe from the field? And what are some of the things that you do there that may be a little bit different?
I would say that there's two big aspects that separates Reyna from some of the others, from some of our peers. And one of the biggest aspects is that we have a team, except for myself, obviously, who has long experience in this space, both on the technical side and on the capital side. So that provides us with the opportunity not only to have people who've seen it, but they also know what type of project they want to pick up. They know how to structure a company so that investors get the most bang for their buck, as it were. And so, that determines, acquiring our projects like Gee and Bada Pilas and Medicine Springs. And when the geologists are out looking at these projects, we're looking for scale, we're looking for size, because they have been through the full Lassonde Curve, as it were, right? They've seen something go from discovery all the way up through resource and majors looking at it, putting something into production and seeing the elements that become so critical to a deposit and whether or not it's going to make it, whether or not it's going to go and become something. And one of the big things that comes out of that experience is a dedication to the idea of looking and selecting your projects, both for scale and grade, right? Because we all want the grade. Obviously, that's how you make the big money. You need the grade, you need enough silver at high enough grade that you can make money and survive when silver is at whatever your worst possible nightmare is. Pick that number in your head. Okay, what's the kind of deposit that you need so that your all-in sustaining cost is low enough that you can make it through that? But it also has to be big enough that you can catch multiple market cycles, because you want to catch those highs. When silver goes to whatever your dream is made of, pick your number. You want to be able to party all night, and you can party with much fancier champagne if you've got higher grade. So those are sort of our big backbones to the company. And the second point would be a dedication to the philosophy doing geoscience-backed exploration, not just putting the pieces together, but figuring out where the cutting edge technology is, where the cutting edge ideas are that we can apply to our project. How can we approach these districts, these important historic districts, and say, the science tells us this is just part of the system. Where's the other part, right? So, for instance, our Gigi project is in the heart of the Santa Eulalia district, one of the world's largest, what we call carbonate replacement deposits, or CRDs. The district produced 500 million ounces of silver. And from what we know studying CRDs worldwide, that's half the system. That's just the distal portion. And so you go, where's the other half? And this style of exploration is referred to as ore systems exploration. And that's something that we're really honing in on, really focusing on. And you don't just have to have a project that you've got half of the system already taken. For instance, our Medicine Springs project in Nevada, we think we have the full system. And that's the style of exploration. That's the kind of expertise that we bring to this space. And because the team's done it before, we're lucky that a lot of investors who are long-term holders, as well as institutions, they want to get in on the front side as early as they can, because wouldn't it be great if this is Mag Silver Take Two, if this was the daughter of Mag, as it were, because there's your true Cinderella story in this space.
It's interesting you bring that up, because there's something that investors like to look at called the Lassonde Curve. And essentially it's just a way for people to understand the mining life cycle. So I'm trying to get one up here that we can talk about so I can put it on screen. Oh, I got one. The Lassonde Curve basically is like an investor shortcut done by Pierre Lassonde to understand the stages of a mining company. If people are wanting to invest in and to understand how it works, you have discovery, exploration, then and that's in the early stages where you're really looking at the resource that you have. Once you determine the resource that you have, then it goes into sort of the engineering phase where you're doing your preliminary economic assessment, your feasibility studies, and then eventually you may make a mine decision and move it into production. This is for something that goes all the way from exploration all the way through to production, not assuming any other takeovers or anything like that along the way. So that's important. It's important to know what stage you're in terms of price and how you're going to invest and the time that you need to invest. But, we were talking before the show, Lauren, there's another aspect to it, and it has to do with grade. And you were mentioning that there's actually a formula for helping people determine not only is it the life cycle of the company that you're in, but you need to look at the type of grade that the company has and whether or not they're going to make money. Can you talk about how you go about determining, is there like a formula or a process that you use for determining what is a good project?
I came from a house where we really talk a lot about Archie's rule. And Archie's rule was developed by Archibald Bell of Noranda back in the day when a project hit his desk. It had to, right off the bat, meet a threshold. And that is that your net smelter recovery has to be at least 2 times operating cost. So if you look at even an early stage project, and you're looking at the grades that are showing up, the question is whether or not those are the kind of grades that can have an all-in sustaining cost that is low enough that even at your worst market conditions, you can survive or even make money. So when you plot out Archie's rule, and it's something that you can use for just about any resource commodity, you'll see that the general idea here is that if we plot out grade versus silver price, and then look at operating costs, you can see that essentially if something's below 200 grams per ton of silver, it's really hard to stay economic. And with the fluctuations and the cycles in the market, you want something that's buffered from that. If a project only makes sense above $15, that's a totally different economic gain from $8. versus $20, right? You end up in this element, and part of that too is relative to operating costs, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're in an area that has low operating costs, then you can make more money, right, when your grade's high. And it's really hard to reduce your operating costs below a certain level, is the other aspect there. So with silver, we use a general work case cutoff of about 300 grams per ton silver. Why? Because that can survive pretty much all operating costs until you get to about $120, right? And so when you put that together, that gives you sort of a little rule book to use when you're looking at a project. Okay, I'm looking at a resource, or I'm looking at some of the drill results. Does this thing have the chance to have the grade that's necessary? If it does, that's something when I'm looking at a project that I go, check. Okay, now, once it's past Archie's, now I'm going to pay attention to some of the other aspects. Now I can move to, is it big enough? Great. It has the chance to be big. Now I look at, where is it? What's the jurisdiction? What's the potential for operating costs? Because if I look at it from just a base hard numbers exploration side of things, economic side of things, those are sort of the use cases that I really pay attention to. And, looking at a particular team that's put something together that tells you, okay, they've been here before. They've got filters that they've established for project selection. Okay, I'm going to take a look at what they've got. If we're looking at a new project that we're considering taking on, that's something that's on that checklist of, would it be interesting to explore here as well, is, does it have the grade right off the, because it's pretty hard to magically make a grade. When someone figures that out, please let me know. That'd be great for all of us. But this is a way to sort of buffer yourself as an investor from the market doing this. And I guess I'm skeptical. Maybe it's because I'm a millennial. So I like to hedge my bets a little bit against people ever figuring out, the value of something that I consider important, like silver. And so that's something that I also use as a big factor when I'm looking at a project myself.
Going back to this chart here for a moment.
Yeah.
When you're talking about 120, you're talking about dollars per ounce, all in sustaining cost. Is that the type of chart we're looking at?
Operating cost per ounce.
I got you. Operating cost per ounce. So
each one of those lines over there, if you're above or to the right of that line, you're economic.
Gotcha.
So, that's a way of showing that you can't, there's a certain level that you can't lower your operating costs below. Whether
it's a fixed, there are some fixed costs in there that you're going to pay no matter what.
Costs that you're going to pay no matter what. And there's only so much efficiency that you can put in a system. This is also one of the reasons why we go with looking for big projects, right? Because if you look at mining companies that have a market cap of over $1 billion, they can all do about 10 million ounces a year of silver, right? And the question becomes, how many projects do they do that in? Do they do that in 1? Do they do that in 5? Do they do that in 20? Because each project is a headache. Each mine has its issues. There's going to be something that comes up. The operating costs are, there. So if you can do it in one project, that's a lot better. And it's one of the things, and the style of projects that either as a smaller company, you want to take into production, that's your goal. Or it's also the same style of project as what the majors are looking for. So if you go back to that Lassonde curve, there is the golden parachute idea that comes out at top of the peak. You've got your resource, that's when somebody comes in and says, you know what, thank you for doing the exploration. We're going to, take this project on. And, that has always been sort of a core idea in the junior space for a long time, but there is an aspect that's broken about it. Moira Smith from Liberty Gold gave a fantastic presentation this last year at GSA about it, where you do have the issue that if you don't have the grade, you don't have the size, it's still difficult as a small company to put something into production that can really make it.
So I want to talk about technology for a moment. Technology is playing a big role in this space. How's it really changing the mining industry? And I ask you that because I think when you talk with the general public, they're not up to date on this stuff. It doesn't come through the mainstream media, and they think that mining is this, you're chipping away at a rock on the wall type of thing. But talk a little bit about how technology has really affected the sector and some of the positive benefits.
Some of the big technology is on the exploration side. So it's finding out new ways to look at fluid paths using oxygen isotope data, right? So you can go, okay, this is the direction I need to go to get to the big thing. That reduces the number of holes that you're putting in the ground. The other aspect is we're a lot more efficient at mining, right? So some of this block cave work that's being done in some of these big underground mines like Juanicipio that Mag Silver has, where you're dealing with the kind of thing where if you're going after something that's high enough grade and the right scale, that also reduces the amount of waste rock that you have. It's the other beautiful thing about high grade. You look at something like a carbonate replacement deposit. Okay, you also have the aspect that the thing is naturally neutralizing because it's literally hanging out with limestone. One of the reasons why you have that mineralization is the acidic mineralized fluid interacts with the limestone, that reacts, the sulfides drop out. But you also still have that neutralizing factor of the limestone around it for when you're processing things. And so it's these recognition of being more efficient at pulling mineralization out. Some of the automated mining trucks that we're doing nowadays, that reduces a lot of risk. But I think from a geology side, because that's definitely more my end, I'm familiar with the production side, but that's less my ball of wax. We're seeing a big focus on going after ore systems. So recognizing that the old timers or people prior to having these full-scale knowledge of how all the pieces go together, you'd focus on the carbonate replacement deposit or the skarn or the porphyry. Why? Because that's what's stuck out on the ground. And so, chasing things from surface, we can now go after blind targets. We can use that oxygen isotope data, figure out where the halo is and move our way around the system. We know more about the geochemistry. We know more about the textures and that we actually want to follow complexity. The more complex a system gets, that's more overprinting, so more pulses of mineralization. That's how you get the high grade, right? So that's one of the big aspects that I think is moving forward. And maybe I'm rose-tinted glasses, but I think that the golden age of exploration is coming up, right? You look at something like Mexico, and a lot of the exploration for some of the biggest districts in Mexico, that's pre-1961. The context that I guess a normal person might not be aware of in geology. It's both one of the oldest sciences and in some ways one of the younger sciences, considering the fact that plate tectonics wasn't really an accepted theory until the 1970s. That's the equivalent of calculus being invented in the 1970s, right? So you have this big change in how we look at how these systems fit in. And you're seeing it happen in Nevada as well, which has had a lot of exploration over the last 40 years. But now people are going, whoa, where did these Carlin systems come from? How are they related to porphyries? How are they related to carbonate replacement deposits? You see I-80 Gold doing that, and they're finding big CRD style mineralization at depth, right? And that's something that we're doing over at Medicine Springs, where at surface we're seeing exposure of the most distal portion of a large carbonate replacement deposit. Okay, how do we move about this system? How big is this thing? Can we really look at the full hub and spoke? Which I realize was a little bit inside baseball terminology, but I think that's one of the big things that's going to be changing in this space is how can we leverage the science, the academic work. Probably one of the fantastic examples on this too right now is Relevant Gold. They took the science that was done by a professor and said, hey, we think that the bottom half of the Abitibi is in Wyoming. That's where Black Hills are. And
boy, isn't that a big change from where people saw that before? That's a huge change.
Huge change. Think about how many giant gold deposits are in the Abitibi. Whoa. What if it turns out that Homestake wasn't a one-off? What if it's not just a lonely mammoth? What if there's a whole bunch of them out there? And that's an example of people doing the good science, taking the academic work, and then applying it to a new space. And from my perspective, I'm pretty excited about where all of this is going with exploration.
Yeah, one of the interesting things about this field, if you're looking to get into it, you're a little bit younger, I think there are cool aspects of the field that didn't exist before. For example, we went out to Guanajuato to look at Guanajuato Silver Mine, and they have these young, I'm going to call them kids, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but young adults, essentially, running these computer systems, mapping out all of this stuff, and they're starting to automate, the mill process. And the amount of technology that really goes into this is interesting. And if you're interested in tech and you're at all interested in resources, there's a lot of areas you could get involved in and really help out, what I call new mining and maybe next generation mining, whatever you want to call it. But it really is, like you said, it's like, for example, with Reyna, you're finding what you think could be the source of a huge system. And with that other research you're talking about, maybe adjusting the view of an existing system that's been around forever. So all of these assumptions that people may have made about where the minerals are is really being flipped on its head with use of technology. And I think it's going to be really exciting seeing this younger generation get in here and maybe start proving some things wrong that we had thought before. And I think that creates a tremendous opportunity for the market.
Yeah, and I would say, it's not just a case of proving things wrong. I think it's a case of being able to come at it with new tools and proving that was just part of it. It fits into a bigger picture, right? And I think that's going to be the real change, because it also provides you with the opportunity to say, okay, I know that this district did X. It was big, it was high grade. Okay, it's proven that it's got scale and good grade. But from what we know studying deposits like it, whoa, there should be more of this here. Where is it? And that, I think, is going to be one of the other big things. And there's going to be blind deposits as well. But I think overall, it's another factor saying geoscience-based discovery is really where things are going. And to go back to, the discussion earlier about, what is a factor that an investor should be paying attention to. Is there a geologist and mining engineers who are working with this company? Are they on the board? Do they have a voice in the room? Are they taking the style of approach that can best benefit the investors,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because junior companies are values discovery driven, and the discoveries are made by the geologists.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you also have to have the good capital structure so that you can actually,
Mm-hmm.
work on that. And I'm hoping in my career that I can be a good bridge between those two aspects. We'll see. Very early stage.
It is definitely great to get, all of that information, and glad that you provided that here on the program for us, because not only can we apply some of what you taught us here to Reyna Silver, we can apply it to, our general investing strategy as well. So thank you, Lauren, so much for coming on. If people are interested in learning more about Reyna Silver, how do they go about doing that?
Oh, well, we're on Twitter. We're on LinkedIn. You can find us at our website, Reyna Silver, as well. And of course, if anyone has any questions, comments, concerns, or jokes for me, they can email info@Reyna Silver or Lauren at Reyna Silver as well.
Okay,
so,
perfect.
Thank you so much for having me and having this lovely conversation today.
Absolutely. Lauren, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on Inside the Markets with Stock Pulse.